Hello. Okay, I'm a mess. I had a shower and my hair is, well, yeah. I ran and picked up books from the library. So soon we're going to have a video of first chapters. And remember, first chapters is really just for us to see what's out there. Find out what you could, read on your own, or sometimes we find something that we want to read together. And yeah, it was so cold. My hair was frozen. It was just like crazy. Okay, I thought, you know what? Let's keep reading because we have 2 chapters left. So this will probably be our final reading because of this book because, I have time to do it right now. The turkey's in the oven and the dishwasher's going and Timmy's asleep. So all's right with the world. Joey's asleep. Okay, so they just got back from Palm Beach, and this is the trip where it comes out that the pictures of her and Steve Wyatt on holiday, the one with B naked in his arms, I've seen it. She's not really in his arms. He's not really cuddling her either. She's just kind of standing there, and he's there seated. To me, it looked like maybe she had on some sort of a bloomer, but I couldn't tell. It's an old photograph. It's hard to tell. But I mean, they keep reiterating that she's stark naked, so I'm sure she must be stark naked. Very tiny, like 2 years old, maybe, just a tot. And maybe she's 3. I'm not sure, but she looks between 2 and 3 to my eye. So that's all going down. Sarah is, understandably having a minty bee. This is the plane ride home that we've heard oft discussed of, Sarah putting the sick bag over her head and throwing the flannels, the cloths, the tissues, all that stuff. They're clearly drunk. I mean, Leslie is saying that they are just having a ball. They're laughing. It's not just Sarah, it's Leslie too. Like, she's having a big laugh. She doesn't really mention what Jane Ambler, the secretary of Sarah, is doing. Not that I can recall anyway, but so, they've been drinking champagne all day at this point. So I get the feeling that they're probably a little, sauced. And, yeah. So, then she thinks that Sarah has been informed by Stephen that he and Leslie had an affair because after this trip, Sarah stops talking to her. She won't take her calls, and she won't return, she's not writing back like Leslie's writing. She's calling, and she's just being stonewalled, basically, by Sarah. So, and to me, I'm like, well, there's a lot going on. And she does mention that this is the last trip that Sarah takes as a royal before the divorce, like before they separate, before everything goes, to pot, basically. So part of me was like, is it really because of Leslie and Stephen that Sarah cuts her out, or is it just that there's so much going on in her life and she just can't be bothered? Who knows? It could be both, right? All right, so chapter 26 is entitled Bad Day at South York. The Yorks' marriage was in the eye of the storm. By late March 1992, the situation was volatile in the extreme. Though a strange, uneasy calm had descended, lawyers had been called in on Sarah's initiative to set the wheels in motion for a formal separation. An announcement had been made at Buckingham Palace on Thursday, 18 March, stating brusquely, These discussions are not yet completed, and nothing will be said until they are. Now it was official, and the whole world knew about it. Yet both Andrew and Sarah kept up a brave public face of normality to conceal the anguish of what was going on behind the scenes. 2 nights later, they even went out together to a party at Elton John's house in nearby Windsor. But the undercurrents of tension between them were palpable, and within the walls of Sunninghill Park, the facade was showing the stress cracks. An invitation reached me to spend Sunday, 22nd of March, the first Sunday after the bleak announcement from the palace, with the family at the House of York. The summons came by the usual courier, Major Ron Ferguson, but long distance, all the way to Africa. The previous year I had established contacts for future polo tournaments in Cape Town, and had paid them a flying visit. Now I was back again to snatch a fortnight in the South African summer sunshine, and also to pursue a new project I'd had in mind for some time, starting up a small company to manufacture children's clothes. I would use cheap, good quality cloth and the skilled local labor that was crying out for work. The name, Catchy Kid. It had been 2 busy weeks trying to sort out the problems facing the launch, putting a quart of work into a pint of time as I raced against the clock to get the project off the ground. But no one could possibly have missed the reports of the crisis in the Yorks' marriage. Rumor was rife, filling pages of newsprint as well as the airwaves on South Africa's somewhat limited TV and radio programs. Ronald phoned me practically every day, and though he kept telling me, don't believe everything you read, I knew he was worried and saddened. I kept my mind on work and pushed gossip and speculation away. There would be time to catch up when I got home. My 2 weeks were up. As I was packing in my hotel room on the Saturday afternoon for the night flight home, the phone rang. Ronald was on the line. Come and spend the day with us. I'll meet you at Heathrow and take you straight to Sunninghill. We can have a relaxing Sunday lunch. There was a catch in his voice as he added almost beseechingly, It will do Sarah good to have you around, and I know Andrew wants to hear all about South Africa. Of course I will, I said. I'd be delighted. What a wonderful girl you are, said the Major, and the line went dead. By a bitter twist of fate, my own life was only 4 weeks from falling apart at that very moment. But as the South African Airways jumbo slid through the early dawn sky, and I stared out the window to marvel at the first flush lightening the English countryside below, I just felt good to be home again. I couldn't know it then, but 2 weeks previously, the day after I had flown south, the Queen had paid a secret trip to Sunninghill for Sunday afternoon tea with Andrew and Sarah to discuss their marital problems. The Duchess of York had apparently told Her Majesty that she felt the marriage could not be saved, and the die seemed irrevocably cast. Yet, as in all matters of the heart, nothing is ever quite as it appears. All I knew was that I was going to spend Sunday with a couple of old friends who were in trouble, whatever their title, rank, or position in the social strata. If I could help, I would. If not, maybe I could inject some cheer into the day. I was idly mulling over these thoughts as the plane nosed over the fields of Berkshire, the pilot giving us an incredible view of the Thames. Ironically, Windsor Castle was just below, as was, presumably, Sunninghill Park, although I failed to locate it. Sarah would be asleep. Andrew might be up and about and heading for the golf course, depending on how late the Saturday night had been. Thankfully, I had no idea of the turmoil that was about to be unleashed on so many of the players in the dangerous games we all had been playing. All I wanted after the 12-hour flight was a long soak and a good hot bath. Ronald, dependable as ever, was there to meet me in the arrivals hall. He gave me a big, unashamed hug, took my trolley, and headed for the car park. Tired? He said. Not too bad, I assured him. There's only a couple hours time difference, so I don't get jet lag, but I could do with a nice hot bath. That you will have, he promised. Behind the wheel of his BMW estate, he lapsed into an uncharacteristic silence. Are you all right? I queried. Is it that bad? He shrugged. The usual. I suppose you've read the papers. Things are a bit taut. In fact, they're pretty desperate. I just feel sorry for Sarah. The loyalty of the Fergusons again, so touching, yet so misplaced. Oh, yes, I said, of course. Then, who's going to be there today? The whole family, Andrew, GB, the kiddies. He paused. Alison Lobel. I think you've met her. I had. Alison was a tawny-haired divorcee, a close friend and confidant of Sarah's, recently separated from Norman Lobel, who had originally opened the Royal Berkshire Polo Club with Brian Morrison to bring polo to a wider audience. Ronald hesitated again, keeping his eyes on the road as he turned off the M3 at Virginia Water and headed into the leafy country lanes. At last he said, and John Bryan will be there with his sister. He added gloomily, I don't know why the fellow's there at all, I really don't. He's supposed to be advising GB on her finances, but his voice trailed off. There was no one around at the entrance at that hour. The policeman from the Thames Valley Force saluted us through the gates, and I entered the portals of Sunninghill Park House for what would prove to be the last time. It might have been my imagination, though I don't think so, because I was always very sensitive to atmosphere. And I could sense an air of brooding tension hanging within the great house as I followed Ronald over the gray and white tiles of the empty hall to a guest room where I could change and have my long-awaited bath. Okay, I don't think it's like, oh, I'm so sensitive. I could feel tension. I could feel the gloom. Of course, they literally just announced their... Oh, dear. Stating the obvious. No one's down yet, said the Major, except Andrew. He's out on the golf course. The rest of them are still in bed. Late night. They were at Elton John's celebrating his divorce or something. It transpired that Sarah and Andrew had left in separate cars to fool the handful of reporters and photographers camped outside the gates, joined up a few miles down the road, and then Andrew had driven his wife in the family Jaguar to Elton's sprawling mansion outside Windsor to join a party for 20 of his special show business friends. Among them had been Billy Connolly, Sting, and his wife Trudy Stiles. Barry Humphries, Kenneth Branagh and his wife Emma Thompson, and Rowan Atkinson. Elton, of course, was a long-standing friend of both the Yorks, and had been a guest at their wedding. The couple had stayed 4 hours and returned to Sunninghill around 2 a.m. Now Ronald shook his grizzled head in bewilderment. Sarah is going to tell me everything, but sometimes I can't make that girl out, he said. One minute they're talking about splitting up, the next they're out on the town together. In the guest suite, I took my time, soaking luxuriantly in the bath and using the S&A monogram towels that had been laid out for me by Terry, the faithful Jeeves, who himself would not stay much longer in that house of growing shadows. Eventually, I dressed in blue jeans, a light sweater, and a hacking jacket, and made my way to the dining room for breakfast. The balding figure of John Bryan was the first person I saw, turning from the mantelpiece by the fire to stare at me as I walked in. His jaw went a little slack, but he recovered himself swiftly and managed an uncertain smile. Given that the last time I had seen him, he had been sniffing a curious white substance after which he had tried to take me to bed, I could hardly blame him for looking shaken. Leslie has just flown in from South Africa, said Ronald, as he made introductions. We've met, said John uncomfortably, extending a hand. How was it down there? Hot, I said. Somehow the very presence of this man in Sarah's home made me feel uneasy. Then I added brightly, oh, yes, John, you've still got my earrings. Hello, what's going on here? Andrew appeared in the doorway, freshly showered and changed from the golf course. Oh, yes, I said brightly. John and I have met before, through a mutual girlfriend. I left my earrings behind on his coffee table. Oh, God, John exclaimed. His cheeks flushed, but he recovered well. So you did. I must send them back. Yes, give the girl her earrings back. Andrew's tone was amused and slightly sardonic. His demeanor was quiet, but outwardly cheerful. He retreated to his study, and I saw him start writing at his desk. Sarah and John vanished to another part of the house, presumably to talk about her future, financial and perhaps personal. My own surmise is that they did not actually make love until the Yorks' marriage had irrevocably broken down and the couple had split, but it is impossible to believe that nothing of a more intimate nature happened when those damning pictures were taken in the villa in the south of France. Meantime, I contented myself spending the hour before lunch playing with the little princesses. We sat on a Persian rug in front of the fireplace, with Beatrice and Eugenie looking like child models in their matching Sunday best tartan dresses. They really are the cutest kids, I thought again. Ronald relaxed in an armchair nearby, smiling down fondly at his grandchildren. It was like any happy Sunday family scene, except that this was like no other family I knew, and alas, they were anything but happy. I devised a new game. Beatrice had produced a jigsaw puzzle with big wooden animals that fitted into each other. I tell you what, I said, let's try it this way. And I threw the pieces onto the floor, scattering them across the rug. Right, I ordered, consulting my watch. You've got 2 minutes to pick up as many pieces as you can and bring them back to me. Ready, steady, go! Squealing with laughter, the little girls fell onto their knees and scrambled around, peering under chairs and tables, clutching the wooden animals in their small fists, rushing back when I called, "Time's up!" This was fun. This was great. There's nothing like the sound of children's laughter to enliven a place, and the atmosphere lifted immediately. All too soon it was time for lunch. Andrew came in from his study and squatted down to help me pick up the pieces. Nanny Allison took Eugenie away to her place at the far end of the dining room table, while I counted the animals. One was missing. Where is it? I asked Beatrice. Don't know, Leslie. She was a pert one and could be cheeky, too. I said, well, it must be somewhere. We've got to find it before we go into lunch. Andrew echoed, yes, come on, Beatrice, you've got to find it. The little girl started sniveling, then all at once burst into tears. I don't know where it is, Daddy. Suddenly, Sarah was standing over us, hands on hips. "What are you doing to my daughter?" she demanded, her voice full of anger. Then she swept Beatrice up and marched out of the room with her. I noticed that the sobs miraculously stopped. On my knees on the floor, I looked at Andrew. He looked at me. No words passed between us, but there was an unspoken message. Bloody hell. Then he simply shrugged his shoulders and followed his wife out into the dining room. As the lunch progressed, and Terry carved roast lamb for the guests from the sideboard, I had the oddest feeling that nobody really knew why they were there. The atmosphere was desperately tense, but also artificially bright, with Sarah pretending that nothing had happened, and Andrew doing the same. For myself, I recognized that the party was almost over. Sarah had begun to distance herself from me after Palm Beach, and from then on, I had started to sense the famous royal chill that Stephen Wyatt had fallen victim to before me. Only Ronald's continuing infatuation kept me in the camp, while Andrew seemed impervious to everything around him. Conversation was stilted, to put it kindly, frequently punctuated by those awful silences in which you can hear yourself chewing your own food, and in which the clink of the knife and fork on a plate sounds as loud as Big Ben. When someone did venture a remark, it took its usual course, veering towards the press and how rotten the tabloids were to the royal family. It was Sarah who dominated the conversation. "Isn't it terrible what they write about Diana?" she said. And this was 8 weeks before the Andrew Morton book was published. Oh, I forgot to return that one. John's sister, Baby, who had arrived shortly before lunch, said loudly, "If I were Diana, I'd leave him." Her own parents had split up, I'd recalled. In fact, looking around the table, I realized that every single one of us, apart from Andrew, had come from a broken home. And the princesses, of course. Their turn was to come, poor mites. It gave me a slightly shivery feeling. "They always kick you when you're down," said Sarah bitterly at one point. At this, there was a general murmur of assent. At least they're in accord about something, I found myself thinking. I was sitting next to Andrew, who took refuge from murky waters by questioning me closely about South Africa and my catchy kid idea. "It sounds wonderful. I'm sure it will work, and you'll make lots of money." He was enthused. I wasn't so sure. But I wasn't going to put any more of a dampener on the day. I nodded vigorously. I hope so. On my other side was Alison Lobel, who lived nearby and who had recently split up with her own husband. Norman Lobel was looking after the children for the weekend, which gave her the chance to drop by and console her old friend. Alison knew all about my own background and murmured quietly, "It's terribly important to get out of a dead marriage, don't you think?" Later that afternoon, I had a chance to remark to Sarah, "You seem to be surrounding yourself with people telling you it's good to leave your husband." Her blue eyes flamed briefly in what might have been anger or resentment, but after a moment she merely shrugged and turned away. Lunch was over at last. 2 of the longest hours I have ever spent. I remember Sarah saying to me, "Andrew doesn't like people drinking." From where I sat that day, which was next to him, that statement couldn't have been further from the truth. He seemed to have no objection to if other people wanted to drink, and the wine had flowed pleasantly enough while he drank lemonade. Ronald had manfully kept up a conversation at his end of the table, while I chattered away to Andrew as best I could. Afterwards, Sarah, the Major, and I relaxed round the fireplace, chatting about the children, always a safe and happy topic. Sarah began playing with the girls, but happy as they all looked, I couldn't help remembering what she had told her father once. "My daughters are my passport to security." Ronald was in the middle of a sentence when, without warning, Sarah suddenly sprang up and disappeared into the study where Andrew was working at his desk. Through the open door, I saw her rummage through the shelves of LP cassettes and discs before picking one out. She put it on the hi-fi in the corner and turned the volume up. The opening fanfare of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat resounded through the speaker in the lounge, loud and clear, blaring trumpets, crashing cymbals. Very loud and clear. Sarah came back to us, swinging those full hips of hers and snapping her fingers to the beat, as the voice of the narrator, Tim Rice, filled the room. "Joseph, a fine example of a family man." Andrew frowned, got up from his desk, and went to turn it down. Next thing, Sarah had whirled round and was back in the study, turning it up even louder. It came blasting through into where we were sitting. I saw Andrew jump up like a scalded cat and turn it down again. Sarah turned it up, and it was now so loud that even her father and I went, "Oh, please!" But she was determined to show who was boss. It was a battle of wills, and Sarah won. Joseph, oh, how he loved his coat of many colors. Joseph stayed in the tape deck, and we stayed sitting on the sofas around the fireplace, going rapidly deaf, trying to control our expressions until the first track was over. Conversation was impossible. Even when Ronald looked at his daughter appealingly, she simply tossed her red hair and ignored the silent message. John Bryan jumped up and approached her, extending both hands. "Shall we dance, ma'am?" Sarah inclined her head in acceptance, and without a word, John took her into his arms, and they danced together in a kind of old-world courtly intimacy around the living room of Sunninghill Park. Although no words were spoken, their body language was patently sensual, and my mind instinctively leaped to an image of Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Then the little girls joined in, and the four of them held hands and whirled blithely around the floor. I glanced through to the study and saw Andrew turn and give his wife and children and their dancing partner one long, steely stare before his lips tightened, and he turned away and went back to his work. When I next looked, he had his head in his hands, as if to blot out the music, or the familiarity that was being displayed in his own home, or both. As the music ended, John took her hand and performed an exaggerated bow. "Thank you, ma'am," he drawled. "Thank you," said Sarah, and with a laugh she led the way out of the room to continue their financial discussions elsewhere. Ronald told me later, he has advised Sarah to go for a house for herself in England where she can bring up the children, and to hold out for £5,000 a week income for herself, for life. He added that Brian had reassured his daughter, "Don't worry about anything, it's all going to be all right." "What about this place?" I queried. "A lot of people are under the impression that the Queen gave it to them as a wedding gift, but she has absolute ownership of it. They pay a nominal rent. So it would revert to the monarch, and if and when Andrew and Sarah divorced. No wonder Sarah and her advisor were spending so much time in such intense discussions. On that uncomfortable day in Sunninghill Park, filled as it was with tension and the scoring of petty points, it was obvious to me that Sarah felt more relaxed in the company of John Bryan than she did with her husband. It was there in her every look, in her manner, in her very deportment. Ronald wanted me to stay the night, but I shook my head. "Ronald, I just can't. I don't feel at all comfortable in this atmosphere," I told him. He was unhappy about it, but he understood. As dusk fell and the lights came on in the big drawing room, I got up to go. I tapped on the open study door, and Andrew turned and gave me a wan smile. "Andrew, I've got to get home." "Already? That's a shame." But somehow I felt he was glad to see me go. It had not been a happy day inside Sunninghill Park. Andrew held me close in a brief hug and kissed me on both cheeks. For a fleeting moment, I remembered what he had told Ronald. "That's a very, very sexy woman you've got there." I liked Andrew a lot. I knew that his mother was the Queen, his brother the future king, and that he had a formidable sister in Princess Anne. But to me, he was just very sweet and impressionable, and never wanted to do harm to anybody. I admired him for his patience and his resilience under almost unbearable strain that he and Sarah and the whole royal family were enduring through those lurid months in 1991 and 1992, when hardly a week passed without some fresh scandal, real or imagined, breaking in the tabloids. Andrew was kind, a responsible father, despite a career that took him away from his home and children so often, and above all, a gentleman. He had been infatuated with Sarah and held the torch for her to the bitter end, but with John Bryan and his sister under his own roof as invited guests, he could hardly say, "Take your hands off my wife," even if he was seething inside. He had been brought up, like all the royal children, not to confront, whatever the provocation. Over the 8 months I was with them, I watched Andrew grow more strained and unhappy, and worse, less confident in himself, as the weeks wore him down. In the early days, he was still a confident young man, excited about life. Now, on the last day I would spend with the Yorks, he was so low that I wanted to reach out and hug and console him. As for the Randy Andy image, when he was younger, why not? But in all the times I met him at Sunninghill, I was not to see a trace of it. If anyone was the fall guy in the breakup of their marriage, it was Andrew. He was the innocent. I am convinced that he had little or no idea of what was going on with Stephen Wyatt. If he did suspect, in the later stages, prior to the discovery of those compromising photographs, first in Stephen's flat, then with John, then he chose to ignore it. But when the pictures from the south of France exploded into print, even patient, controlled, infatuated Andrew could not ignore that. John Bryan had left an hour earlier, with a brief wave in my direction. He seemed glad to be on his way. Ronald was walking me to the car through the dusk when there was a rush of footsteps behind us. Sarah ran up, her face pale and tense. "Dad's." "Oh." She saw me and stopped. "What is it?" I've just had a phone call from the castle. Andrew and I have got to go over there. The Queen wants to see us." "When?" her father asked. Right now. She looked at me. Will you be here when I come back, Leslie? There was a plea in her voice. Suddenly, even the stoic Sarah, shameless as she might be in so many ways, seemed small and scared. I'm sorry, I said. I can't. I've been away for 2 weeks and I've just got to get home. Sarah nodded, her face downcast. Then the old Sarah reasserted itself, and she reached out and gave me a hug, kissed me on both cheeks, and said, Please stay in touch. We'll see each other very, very soon. That was the last time I saw her. Chapter 27. And it is indeed the last chapter. The speed with which a life can be turned upside down or totally destroyed has always filled me with a mixture of fear and a kind of awe. Fate comes in so many forms to play her tricks on the unwary, from the potentially lethal to the totally absurd. A car out of control, a careless cigarette end, wet leaves on the pavement, or a piece of soap left in the bath. In my case, I can pinpoint the moment to a phone call that changed my life. Up to Easter that year, 1992, everything in my garden looked particularly rosy. My chauffeur hire business was thriving. I was gaining new clients every week in the high-powered world of banking and commerce, and I was able to open up spanking new offices for catchy kids in Battersea, which I could rent with a 4-bedroom house attached. On the social scene, too, things were buzzing. A catchy kid ball I had organized at the Langham Hilton in aid of the Variety Club of Great Britain was confirmed for July. Moreover, my 2 little princess friends, Beatrice and Eugenie, were all set to be there, wearing matching ball gowns in royal burgundy silk we had already designed for them, much to the delight of Sarah, who would be escorting them for their very first official public function. The tournament was on course, together with the International Polo Ball that would be staged a few days earlier, with the Duchess of York agreeing to attend both in aid of her pet charity, the Motor Neuron Disease Association. My sideboard at Battersea was full of gold-edged invitations to society functions, and my phone did not stop ringing. It was one call on that same phone which shattered all my dreams. It came at 2 p.m. on a weekday in April, when I was in my workshop supervising the final touches to the fashion show that was to be the highlight of the ball. A reporter from the Sunday Times was on the line, and his words left me dumbstruck. He was investigating, he said, alleged misconduct concerning last year's International Ladies Polo Tournament. Misconduct? I repeated in bewilderment. What are you talking about? The question that followed left me reeling. Was it true that the charity had received only £2,000? Had I misled the sponsors? How much was the hotel bill for the competitors? And finally, Miss Player, where do you bank, and what is your account number? The story that appeared on the front page the following Sunday left me devastated. The Charity Commission was apparently investigating discrepancies in the amount of the proceeds that should have gone to the Save the Children Fund, certainly the first I had heard of such rumors, and, as it turned out, when I called them the next day, the first the Commission had heard of it too. My lawyer instantly arranged an appointment for me to meet them, and when 2 impressive-looking gentlemen in dark suits arrived, I gladly turned all my papers over to them on the spot. 8 weeks later, they exonerated me completely, a fact I did not see reported anywhere. It was too late. The damage was done, and despite my protestations, the mud stuck. The fund had received £8,000. Sponsorship had raised £70,000. Question: where did the rest go? Answer: to pay for the tournament. You try hosting an event for 48 professional polo players with hotels, transport, including helicopter hire, insurance, ground fees, and ground staff, horses, meals, refreshments, hospitality, along with 1,001 extras like polo shirts, flags, first aid kits, and brochures. Even a new zip I had to buy for one of the ladies, and see how much change you get. That's the truth. I believe that 100%. Platinum Polo International, the company I had formed for the event, in fact, made a small loss, which I was able to wear with, I'm bad at this word, equanimity. Since this tournament had been the first attempt and a rehearsal for the years to come. The article had also impugned my character, suggesting that I had posed as a lady-in-waiting to the Duchess of York. My name had certainly appeared on the Buckingham Palace itinerary from Palm Beach as lady-in-waiting, but I had never pretended to be in anything other than an acting capacity. Besides, official ladies-in-waiting get paid. From that moment, my world fell apart. Ronald rang me the next day. "I'm sorry for you," he said. "It's terrible. Can we do something, anything, to put it right? It's all lies, you know. You don't need to tell me that, but there's really nothing I can do." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But surely, all it would take is a letter from you, or even better, from Sarah, to put the record straight and clear my name, I implored. It's not that easy, he said bluntly. Can't you at least ask her? Leslie, I'm sorry. There was a silence on the end of the line. Then his gruff voice came through with a harsh finality I had only ever heard directed at other people, never at me. Sarah has enough problems of her own right now without having to be troubled with yours. That evening, I wrote my first letter to the Duchess of York. Her problems were on every front page of the nation's tabloids and looked set to stay there. After expressing my genuine sympathy for the situation and offering any help I could give to someone who had always vowed that they would be my true friend, I explained my own predicament. One letter would solve everything, addressed to me, pledging your support, putting the record straight about acting as your lady-in-waiting. One by one, my sponsors for the forthcoming tournament started to fight shy. The first hint of impending disaster was a phone call to Ronald from Harrods. They apologized, but from now they would not sponsor anything with which my name was involved. I can't say I blamed them, was his bleak reaction. Next to fall out were American Airlines, followed a day later by Regina Royal Jelly. Then all the other sponsors. Always the same pattern, a brief impersonal call to my offices, no excuses, and always because of that story. One or two senior executives had their secretaries call to cancel appointments that would have brought in big business, and from Sarah, silence. I sent her another letter and left 2 messages at Sunninghill without response. Ronald's calls became a rarity. Every time I raised the subject of his daughter, he became non-committal. I headed down to South Africa again. My Catchy Kid project was online with production, and I took my London manager with me to check on everything. We had been there 3 days when lightning struck twice. 6 o'clock on a warm April evening in the southern hemisphere, autumn in Cape Town, spring in London. Lights started to appear like glowworms crawling across the city. The phone by the bed rang beside me, making me jump. Ronald's voice, low and shaky, came through. Leslie, I have some very bad news for you. Please sit down. Oh my God, Ronald, what's happened now? There has been a very damaging story in the news of the world suggesting you and I are having an affair. This is going to ruin us both. What? I don't believe it. I fumbled for the bed behind me and sat down. How do you know? Are you sure? Who told them the story? My sources tell me it was one of your staff who did a deal with them for £5,000. There are people who are out for the kill. The faxes. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining the scene as one of my trusted employees photocopied Ronald's indiscreet outpourings of love and held on to them until the time came to use them. His voice was almost a moan. It will be the breaking of us. And it was, as far as I was concerned. The story broke in Britain's most widely read tabloid that Sunday. And from that moment, the wolves were howling at my door. I flew home the next morning, walking calmly through a knot of pressmen awaiting at the arrival gates. My head held high, handbag swinging. I had taken a gamble that they had no pictures of me wired through yet, and would be on the lookout for a furtive woman in dark glasses and headscarf trying to slip through the net. The gamble paid off, though I was repeatedly called on the tannoy? I don't know what that is. To respond to phone calls, which I ignored. Sarah had warned me about getting the press on my side. What she hadn't told me was how to get out of the goldfish bowl when the sharks arrived to eat you for lunch. Back in London, I surveyed the wreckage of my life. One by one, my sponsors for the forthcoming tournament dropped out, and soon the trickle became a flood. Catchy Kid closed down because every single order placed was canceled that week. We lost our offices, and my home with it. One person opened his front door to me, my brother Neil, with a sleeping bag and a space to lay it out on the living room floor of his East End council flat. It is still the only roof I have over my head in Britain. Good grief. She was making all this money before? Like, she was driving a Rolls Royce and her brother was in a council flat? Okay, that's crazy. Shouldn't she have, taken her brother in? I don't know. Plans for the ball were canceled. I wrote a letter to Sarah, to her office in Buckingham Palace, and this time I got a reply. A formal note from her equerry informed me. Her Royal Highness the Duchess of York thanks you for your letter, the contents of which have been noted. That was all, and my phone calls came up against a similar blank wall. Now I knew what it was like to be chilled out. Ronald had told me from now on that our only contact should be by phone, and that those calls should be circumspect in the extreme. During one of them, I told him about Sarah. I'm sorry, he said glumly. It hasn't been easy for me either. But she wanted us to be together. I found myself half shouting, close to tears. I know, was all he said. A few invitations still filtered through, but I had been made a virtual social outcast. The tap had been turned off. The worst moment was a call from a senior executive of one of the sponsors of the Guards Polo Club asking me kindly not to attend any further functions on the hallowed turf of Smith's Lawn, as I would make other guests feel very uncomfortable. I fought back tears until I put the phone down with as much dignity as I had left in me. Then I sobbed my heart out. After all I had put into the sport. On 5th June 1992, the Charity Commissioners issued a statement to the press. The Commissioners have been inquiring into the International Ladies Polo Tournament 1991 run by Platinum Polo Limited in support of the Save the Children Fund. They are satisfied that the charity has received all monies due to them under the agreement with Platinum Polo Limited, and that the agreements between Platinum Polo Limited and the sponsors were also fulfilled. As I said, it came too late. But at one cocktail party given by an old polo friend at the Dorchester Hotel, who should come bursting through the crowd to embrace and kiss me as if we were long-lost sisters, but Jilly Cooper. She had already sent me a lovely letter of support. Keep your chin up, don't worry about it, she said. She had endured the onslaught of media with her husband, Leo, and knew just what I was going through. Bastards! I'm so sorry for what they've done to you, were her opening words. Dear Jilly, it was good to have one ally in the camp at least. She voiced her opinion in typical style. I know the Charity Commission have cleared you, and it's just terrible that nobody's printing it, she proclaimed loudly. As for that other business, I wonder how many people in this room can really point the finger and not feel guilty themselves. A few heads turned, and a few weak smiles were directed my way. But once you've been branded a scarlet woman, the scar tissue takes an awfully long time to heal. Jilly chuckled suddenly. I have to tell you, Leslie, that I nearly came to blows with Sue Ferguson at the Cartier's match last week. I had been speaking out in your favor, and she rounded on me in the bar and hissed, How dare you support that Leslie player in public? I snapped back, I'll support who I like. I thought she was going to punch me on the nose, and I'd have done the same to her. Luckily, we kept control and just glared at each other before walking away. Jilly apart, I felt the big chill deepen. Away from the social scene, it was worse. My business funds had been swallowed up by the disastrous Catch a Kid venture, and the agency was struggling to survive. At least, I thought wryly, I had my Rolls Royce. The market value was so low it would have been a crime to have sold it. Finally, I decided to make for the place where I had found peace in my life. The sun is blinding my eyes as I sit on the patio looking out at where two oceans meet. The sea is turbulent today, crashing on the rocks below as I write the final words of my story. Diana, the friend who lent me her villa on the outskirts of Cape Town, will be back in a few days, and I will pack my case and head back to London. I think of Sarah and remember how someone once described the way she learned to ski. She was always fast and furious. She tended to ski outside her limit, taking chances, which is when the adrenaline starts running. It gives you a high, which some people might find orgasmic. That was the way she lived her life, and probably always will. If it really does look like fool's gold running through the veins of the Fergusons, maybe it buys them happiness anyway. And Ronald? I realized that once the newspaper articles appeared, I would lose a lot. What I didn't count on was losing the one thing I needed most, the support of two people I had counted as friends. I treasured the exquisite clock and whistle, but they are his for the asking if ever he wants them back, and he knows it. We had one last conversation before I left London. So it has come to this. You really have to go. His voice was choked. Goodbye, Ronald. Goodbye. He slowly put down the phone. The book is now written, and to a certain extent I feel cleansed. As I evaluate myself in its pages, I realize that of course I have made many mistakes. If I felt that this book was unnecessary and that my life could be put right without it, believe me, I would destroy it here and now. In being truthful, the agonies and personal analysis have at times brought me even closer to the edge. At social occasions, I am still the target of judicious stares. But I know that virtually all those with whom I come into contact avoid me because of what they have heard. The best piece of news I have had since all this began is the knowledge that my story can now be publicly told. I know that many will still condemn me for it. They will say I was in it for the money. But whatever I earn, it will be nothing compared to what I lost. A huge container vessel is far out to sea, churning through the swell. The sun's rays have formed its bow, sending creamy spray high into the sky. The sun's rays have formed a spotlight dancing on the water around it as it plows steadfastly on, heading east out of the murky waters of the Atlantic and into the clear blue of the Indian Ocean. I think I'll follow that ship. Dear God, please give me another chance in life. I just want to be happily married, have a lovely house, 2 sets of twins, a cat, and a dog. That is all I ever really wanted. The end. We did it. The end. All right, the next time we read, we are going to come back to the royals. So, and we're really close to being done this book as well, so we're really flying through. And then, of course, we're reading Jackie O, and we're, yeah, so we've got stuff to keep us occupied anyway. So, meet me in the comments. What did you think? How did you feel about the way it ended? How did you feel about what she has to say for herself? Do you think it would have been better if she hadn't written it at all? Should she have just let sleeping dogs lie and, you know, let people forget? I don't know. It's a shame. I think it's a shame that she wrote this. I mean, we had fun reading it, but I feel terribly sorry for her because once it's out there, it's out there. And look at us, like, you know, 30 years later, we're still reading it, you know? All right. Well, thank you for being with me. I've got to go tend to this frozen bird. It's smelling good now, so it's slowly cooking. And I've decided to make potato scallop because, oh, sometimes I just can't be bothered making mashed potatoes. You know, it's so much effort. So I'm going to do potato scallop, and I'm going to do the dressing and all that good stuff. So, all right, I might what am I trying to say? I don't know. I might come back on later is what I'm trying to say. And my best friend will be here. So I thought maybe we'd make a little video together just for fun, just to say hello and to introduce you. And, you know, you can start to get to know the cast of characters, as it were. All right. I will see you very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.